Hey pilots, welcome to the channel and welcome, as always, to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. My name is Jamie and today we'll be going through Garmin G1000 ILS approaches. So, what is an ILS approach before we start? So, an ILS approach stands for Instrument Landing System, and that means that the plane is going to be given vertical and lateral guidance, that's left and right and up and down guidance to get the plane down onto the runway. It's very handy in low visibility conditions where you won't necessarily know where the runway is, but it's also good for setting yourself up for an approach. Let's say if you're a couple of miles out, it's easier to get a more accurate approach from that distance away. So let me show you how to do it in the Cessna 172 Skyhawk with the G1000 avionics. Honestly, any plane that uses the G1000 will also be usable with the ILS approaches I will be explaining in today's video. So today we're going to be setting up something slightly different. If you're in the middle of a flight, you can always set up your ILS approach yourself, which I've covered in another video, the IFR flight plan video. But if you just want to practice them, what you can do is you can zoom into an airport. So we're going to zoom here to Dublin International. We're going to set it as our departure and also our arrival. So we're going to click 28 left again. Set as our arrival. Now we've got no flight plan or anything here. There's no route. What we have to do is click IFR low altitude because we're in a Cessna, it's not going too high. And we have to go to this drop down menu here that says approach. We're going to click it and we want it to be set to ILS 28 left or whatever runway you're going to be landing on. And this generates a routing like this. So we're going out of the airport, okay, and we're going up to this waypoint here, which I believe is, oh never mind, this is just a turn. This is going to be the start of an arc. And once we get to about here, this is going to be the start of the ILS approach. Okay, this is going to be the waypoint LAPMO. And about here at MAXEV, it's not showing where it is, but that's where we can start our ILS approach. So what do I mean by that's where we can start? I'll show you now. So what you'll need to do is load up a chart, an approach chart. So there's multiple websites that you can use to find charts. But a lot of them are subscriptions, and you might necessarily want to, pay for something. I don't have any of the subscription services. I use the free charts that are online. You might just want to be careful, though, if you're going to be using a chart that it's not coming from like an insecure website. You'll see the little lock in your left-hand corner of your URL bar. If that's like red or if it's, saying not secure, well, then you should probably not use that website, but find a chart. I like to use a website, and it's called opennav.com, and I'll show you what you can do with that, okay? So, not every airport will be on OpenNav. We're in caps lock anyways, okay? So, we go on to OpenNav. Not every airport will be here with charts, but what we can do is type in the ICAO code, the name of the airport, or our IATA code. So, we're doing our ICAO code, so EITW for Dublin. You can see it here, it comes up with a search result for Dublin Airport. And we're going to scroll down until we see charts. And we're going to do an arrival, it's not an arrival chart, it's an approach chart. And we're doing it for runway 28. We're going to load that up. It's going to come in as a PDF. And this is what we're greeted with. So this looks a little bit intimidating. We're really going to be focusing on this chart here for now. But we've got different, up here at the top, we've got the heading, I guess, for what this is. So it's an instrument approach chart. We've got our elevation, all of our frequencies here, saying to consult our NOTAM. This is the heading for what actually the chart is concerning. And down here then, this is our chart of like a bird's eye view of the runway. So this runway here is 28, and we're given a lot of things here. So let's just break it down. So what we're going to be focusing on is this triangle that goes down here to the runway. And this is going to be guided down to a beacon, which is basically telling the aircraft, hey, I'm here, you have to fly towards me. And we're going to be flying down towards that beacon. And what we have to check for is our ILS DME frequency, which is here, 111.35. And if we're in range, we should see IDW. So that's really handy. That's something we will need in regards to our navigation. Here is our our pattern if we need to hold. we won't really need that. That's kind of also our missed approach chart as well. Missed approach will be here. We have to jump right to Lapmo, which is about here. And next we're going to find out where our decision height is, okay? So this is going to be really important, not so much in Cessna, but in an airliner. This is really important. So it's coming down here, and we're going to go to the second part of the chart, and we can think of this as like our side profile. So the plane will be here. This will be the side of the plane. We're going down, and we're going to be starting our 3-degree glide slope down to our runway, which is this little small black line. So what we need to know with this, the key information, is that we have to be 2,500 feet. This will vary from airport to airport, but we need to be at 2,500 feet when we're going to MAXEV. MAXEV, like I said, is the waypoint that we'll need to be at before we start our descent. Okay, and we're going to be, once we're on MAXEV, we can go down to the runway. In terms of our decision heights then, like I said, we'll be using our Cat 1, and we're going to be using just A. Doesn't really matter, they're very, very similar in terms of their heights. We're going to go with 347 here. So our decision heights, also known as minimums, is used for, let's say if you can't see the runway at that height, well, you're going to have to go around and try the approach again. It's the decision height. That's it. It's in the name. This is the height where you either opt to land or not to. So that's really all we need to know from this chart. So we're going to move that over to one side, and we're going to click fly. So we're just going to set it to clear skies at midday as well, just to make it easier for everyone involved. We're going to clear skies. Okay, brilliant. So we'll see you on the runway. Alrighty, so we're here at Dublin Airport's 28 left in the Cessna 172, as you can see, and we're going to go through a couple of things before we get into the air. So, first thing we want to know, first thing I want to really verify, I guess, is that the approach is there, so the routing. We're not seeing our straight line here or our arc, but that doesn't really matter. What really does matter that is MAXEV. As long as that's there and that's going down the runway heading, we're happy. We want to also turn over here, and we should see this G here. This stands for glide slope, and this diamond is going to slowly move down as we get closer to MAXEV, and this is what we're going to intercept and follow as we go down in our approach. Our compass, when we turn on to MAXEV or LAPMO really, it will also show LOC 1 instead of GPS, and that will be controlling our lateral navigation. Okay. We're going to also set our altitude to 2,500 feet, because that was the altitude we have to be at for MAXEV. And I think we're pretty much ready to go. So we're just going to engage the autopilot when we get up there, and we'll let the plane do the flying from there. So takeoff speed for the 172 is 55 knots. We won't need all this runway length, but it's only some of the bigger airports that actually have ILS approaches. None of the general aviation airports really do. Alright, so we're up. And we're going to turn on the autopilot. We're going to set it to nav and flight level change. So AP, nav, flight level change. I've got an autopilot video here up in the channel if you want to check that out after this one. Actually, no, check it out before you watch this, because it'll be really handy in understanding how to use the autopilot when we're in here in this approach. So I'll see you when we get to LAPMO. Okay, so we're actually just turning this arc here. We're actually slightly above the ocean here. But this is where I'm going to be telling you what is actually going to happen when we get closer to LAPMO. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to want to do and what we're going to see is this glide slope column here turning green. And this diamond will be turning green. And very, very slightly will be moving towards your altitude, and then eventually below. But once it gets below your altitude, the plane will start to follow it itself. But it won't follow it unless you've clicked the APR button for approach mode. And the approach mode will mean that we'll latch on to the localizer and the glide slope to glide down to the runway. As we're doing that, we're going to obviously be slowing down, bringing out flaps, and hopefully going in for a safe landing. So we're now just starting the arc here. It's going to go to 3,000 feet, but we don't really have to. We're starting this arc here we're slowly, gradually turning towards Latmo. And now I'm going to be telling you what we're going to be doing as we get closer. So once we turn onto the runway heading, okay, we'll see this glide slope here turning to green, and the diamond here moving slowly towards the altitude ribbon. And the altitude ribbon and the glide slope diamond should meet at max EV, or close enough to there. Now, the plane isn't actually going to follow this glide slope, nor the localizer. The localizer, or the compass here, will turn to lock 1 as well, LOC 1, when we turn on to Latmo, really. But what we have to do first is click APR for approach mode. And this is going to lock us onto the glide slope and the localizer, and it's going to be following their guidance rather than the GPS's. And this basically means that we'll be just gliding down the runway. So we can click approach mode before we get to max EV, but we're unlikely to see any descent before we actually get to there. So I'll just see when we get closer to the runway. And obviously when we're going down, descending down to the runway, we're obviously also making sure to, lower our speed, extend our flaps, and just kind of do the normal landing preparations that you'll do. So we're heading swiftly now towards Latmo. You can see it's just right here. The ET is saying about 15 seconds. So now we just want to do some final preparation. So we want to know that our frequency is on 111.35, or whatever our ILS frequency will be for your airport. We should see IDW here. If it's not, we go to the nav knob here. This is going to control our big numbers before the decimal point. This is going to control our small numbers. And this is our standby frequency, so what we have to do to make it the active frequency is to click that button there. We'll swap the frequencies, and you should have your guidance. So we're just slowly nudging towards Latmo. The runway will come in sight fairly soon as well. You can see the airport down there, and we can just about see the runway there, the approach lights. So once we get closer, I'll tell you more about what we're going to do. So once again, we're still keep it on turning, and we're still not going to reduce our speed too much. Once we reach Latmo, we'll decide to slow down a bit. We're right up here at about 127 knots or so. So we've got a bit of slowing down to do, but nothing this plane can't handle. So, a few things new now here have changed. We can see localizer 1 here on our compass, and also our glide slope has turned green. So we can now hand fly this, or we can click the approach mode button, which I'll be doing, just to make it easier. And it will start following the lateral and vertical guidance now. So we're going to slow down. We're not descending yet, because we're not at max EV yet. Still got about a minute to go. And you'll slowly, once we get closer, see the glide slope diamond moving down and down and down. We're slowing right down. We're going to bring out our first stage of flaps about now. And we're lined up at the runway heading more or less 278, I believe, is the heading for Dublin Airport. And we're staring right down the runway. Once we get closer, we'll also be able to see the pappies. These are the two sets of lights either side of the runway. And what these are for is telling us that we're on the 3-degree glide slope. If it's all red, if there's 4 red on each side, we're too low. If there's 4 white, we're too high. And if there's 2 white and 2 red, we're looking good on the 3-degree approach. We can already see our glide slope has actually started to move down a little bit as we nudge ever closer to max EV. We're not going to bring out our full flaps because, frankly, we don't have, a small runway ahead of us. We're going to probably bring it up to our, second last stage, which is 20. We'll bring in our third stage of flaps, and that should do us for our landing here. So we're getting to max sev now in about 50 seconds. So we're just slowly slowing down. We can see that we're starting to see a couple white lights, one each side, and our glide slope is starting to move down. We'll see our vertical speed indicator going down as well at the same time. We'll also be given landing clearance pretty soon, and we'll chat to you when we're starting to descend a little bit further. The glide slope diamond is now completely there at our altitude, and we've started to descend. You can see our plane just completely dipped down there. We're going to manage our altitude now as we start our descent. But for the most part, we can really sit back and relax. Our approach is being done for us. We're not going to be deviating off this approach at all. The plane will be managing pitch and our yaw no matter what we do with the throttle. So there's no need to worry about that. We'll bring in actually our full stage of flaps. It's probably the best idea. So we've just had a little bit of a beep there saying we were below 2500, but obviously we're following an approach. You don't have to. The plane's also controlling our trim, so we're getting our right speed and pitch. And obviously now we don't have anywhere to key in our minimums, which I talked to earlier, the decision height. But in airliners, we would have to key that in into the approach tab in the FMS or the MCDU. We can always look at the PAPIs here, 2 white, 2 red. And what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the autopilot at about 500 feet. Because at that point, you know, we can go down to the runway if need be, but there's no real need to on a day like this where we can see perfectly clearly. So we're starting to come over land again now, which is always a good sign for a single engine plane, because you don't really want to have an engine failure over the water. Still aligned here on the runway, heading of 278. We're slightly deviating just from the way that the autopilot will be just slightly correcting itself. And obviously I'm expecting that you know how to actually land the plane. We've been cleared to land. So what we're going to do is we're going to, you know, slowly, you know, reduce our power, get slower, and we're going to flare. And from there, we're going to just wait for the plane to land. So I'll see you when we get closer to the runway. So just descending down here to the runway. Pappy's still looking good, 2 white, 2 red. Following our glide slope, following our localizer. We're just constantly monitoring the plane's position and I guess just state. As we get closer, Pappy's will start to get a little bit more sensitive, so we're going to have to either focus on our glide slope, which can be pretty tricky when you're hand flying, or once we're closer to the runway. We don't really need to rely on those too much. So getting closer now to our approach speed, I would say that about 55 knots is pretty good for our approach. There's 800 feet, we're just passing that now. I think we'll just disconnect the autopilot from here. So following our Pappies, a little bit off to the left of the runway. So we want to just correct that ever so slightly. I'm sort of trying to follow my glide slope as best I can, but it does get a little bit trickier as we, you know, start to hand fly. There's our 500 feet call out. 500 feet off the ground, that is. Not off sea level. Actually, there's quite a lot of people down here at Dublin Airport. You can see there's someone in an F-18. There's people in BAE Hawks and in Citations, and someone in a A320 has just taken off. So there's actually a lot of online traffic here with us today. We're way, way low down now. Going up over the, I believe that's the M50. That's the biggest motorway in Dublin. It's like a ring road, but anyways, the more you know. We're way low on the Pappies now, but it doesn't really matter. There's our minimums there. Showed the M there. That's our minimums. So it's always good to know. Anyways, we don't need to really make any decisions here. We can see the runway clear as day. So we're just overflying the rapids here, the approach lights. And we're going to be flying over the runway 16. over the displaced threshold now of runway 28 left, which is always good. And we're not going to aim for the landing threshold. We're a bit high as it is. But we're going to cut the throttles there, and we're going to flare. Hold it up. And there we go. There's our landing. And very well done. You've completed an ILS approach. So thank you very much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, please remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.